You're going to see some familiar faces. You're going to see a new face, but it's going to be a great conversation. We took on Michael Malice's book, The New Right.
So yeah, anyone who's been clueless about what's been going on for the last 3 years, I think this like sheds light on all of it, like incredibly. I mean, like he is savantish in the way that he explains a lot of this. Yeah.
But anyway, let's get on to the man of the hour. So Michael Malice. I don't think there's anyone at this table that loves Michael Malice more than David does. And I don't think there's anyone here that doesn't love him, period. I mean, a phenomenal voice, anarchist by political. If you're going to label him as something, he'll call himself a self-professed anarchist. A troll, that'll probably be the second thing, if not the first thing. He loves proving points through humor, insults, flipping things on their heads, changing paradigms. That's kind of the main gist of how Malice likes to get his point across. If you follow him on Twitter, he's a shit stirrer. That's exactly what he does. Was there any like underlying theme? I know Rufo is always good for the 30,000-foot view of the book.
There was absolutely a point where I'm sitting in my office reading, and I am just giggling like a schoolgirl, and my wife comes in, she goes, "What's going on in here?" And I was like, you got to listen to the way. It was when he talks about Gavin McGinnis, and he was trying to meet Ann Coulter, and he's like, I don't know what to say to her, and he's just describing the way McGinnis's face,
the mentality that he knew he had him,
and he just the shitty grin that was on McGinnis's face, and I'm just laughing because I'm picturing the whole thing because I knew exactly where he was going as I was reading it.
So I said the overarching theme of the book, it basically is, listen, these people are terrible, and they're idiots, but they got this one thing right, and let me explain to you how they are mastering it.
Right.
That's essentially what I got out of Malice in this whole book, is like, listen, there's a lot of dummies and idiots in this group, but they got one thing right, and I'm going to explain it to you. And that one thing is basically how to flip the left and the evangelical left, as he calls it throughout the book, on their head.
Yep.
And completely changed the game. And the cathedral thought it was in control, and it's not. And it's because of these people that happened.
I think what I like about the book too is that he does describe like the evangelical left, talking about how like it's basically their religion to be this woke, this huge like woke culture, and it does make a lot of sense. And it's like it's kind of crazy because you have like conservatives and Republicans that are like, they're known as like the religious zealots, I guess, right? And then you have like the left, and like their religion is the woke culture now. So he's equalizing both sides and making you understand that a little bit.
He also says that their arguments are never arguments to try to win the logical debate. It's just a cudgel to destroy you, right? You're a heretic if you don't follow the religion. And those who are heretics, we are not going to engage you as an equal. We're going to end you. So that's why they treat it really like a religion rather than some conversation.
Yeah, and there is just constant purity tests. Right, like he breaks down how they use language and how they change language. So they're changing the definition of words, and if you don't use like the current definition of the word, they then can just completely write off every part of your opinion after that, right? Like, so if you use like the word from 6 months ago, they're like, all right, whatever, boomer, and then like they'll move on, right? Like
it's like the litmus test.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And it's like, oh, you're not part of the in crowd, so we don't have to listen to anything that you said afterward. Like it's not even logical afterward. They won't even hear it. And he echoes that later in the book, right? Like he talks about how like at the fringe, once you've kind of been like relegated to the outside of the community and the culture, you have nothing to lose. So like you have everything to gain from being innovative or being smart or like taking a shot. And so like when the white like late teens, early 20s males that are living in the basement, right? When they like decide to like troll someone, it's like it's nothing but upside, because if they trolled them and nothing happens, then whatever, they wasted a couple of seconds. But if they trolled them and then they got like someone to get outed, or like they got the left to basically oust someone that was prior like thought of as one of like their core members, it's all game for them. Like they all gain from that.
Yeah, it's a big thing of the asymmetric warfare aspect that you're talking about, right? I think it ties into both your points, I think the idea that the new right is more about process and substance, right? It's like we don't really care about these issues so much as we just want to mess with the process. The way that your process is and the way that you exert control is all process, right? It's the way that they talk, right? Oh, you didn't say that the right way, or you don't present yourself the right way, or you have this particular thing about you, right? And then it's the same thing we face in politics, which libertarians are always complaining about, right? It's like it's not that we don't have the right candidate in this. It's the entire process, the way everything is done. Like even if we get our perfect guy in there, it's not going to matter because you have a process set up that you can't win, right? You're screwed either way. We all know this when you deal with the police, right? You never win, right? Or when you deal with a teacher when you're 5 years old. You lose no matter what. Like there's never a time where the teacher or the principal is going to be like, you know what, actually, yeah, Mrs. X, she was wrong and you were right. Like literally never. It's unimaginable, right?
So sorry.
Yeah, like it's unimaginable for that to happen, right? So they set up the process. You no matter what, you lose. I think that's the. I've been complaining to Dan about this for since high school, right? The idea that like you can't if you understand what's going on here as a substance argument, you've already lost. That's the distraction, right? Like and he brings this up about like the marginal tax rates and all these other types of things. Like arguing about those types of things is exactly where they want you, right? Because they know you're never winning there, right? Like, okay, even if we lose, okay, maybe the tax rate went down slightly, right? Like we're still winning everything else, right? Like that's fine with them. So I think that's really like to boil it down from the perspective I saw it is like that's his insight about it is it. They finally saw past the veil of the substance, right? The man behind the curtain, right? And like, oh, right, we can see the process that they're dealing with. Yeah, not only do they not care about you, they don't even care about the people that they're ostensibly advocating for, right? And I think that's the one part where it's so much not like a religion, right? Like a religion that we normally think like Christianity, right? Is like actually evangelical. Like I want to try to convince you, right? And they're always being like missionaries, always being criticized for that, right? Like, well, yeah, we know that you went there and you risked your life and you didn't have any money, you didn't have nothing else, right? But like you were trying to convert them. That's the only reason you did those nice things to those people and set up those schools and those hospitals, right? You were trying to trick them. People criticize Mother Teresa for that type of stuff all the time, right? But like. If the left were actually a religion where they were trying to convert people, they would have completely different tactics, right? And Michael Malice brings this up in many interviews where, like, if you actually wanted to convince people of what you were doing, right, there was a really funny tweet with Ben Sass where he completely fell for this, right? Because on Rogan, Malice was like, if you really wanted to convince people, you would get like a token Republican like as part of your administration, have talks with them, like pretend that you were doing something with them, whatever. And then Ben Sass on Twitter was like, "I'll do it."
Yeah,
it was like, what? Like, are you serious? Like,
I volunteer as tribute.
Nothing could have proved his point more than that, right? Like he's literally like he missed the point entirely and is volunteering himself for this token position where you're not going to get anything done. It was like I couldn't believe that he fell for that so clearly. But yeah, it was ridiculous.
I do like the way he opens up explaining the new right, right? He explains the new right is the fringe is where innovation and insanity lay, and that's where the new right lays, right? And he turns around and he says sometimes innovation seems like insanity because one hasn't encountered such concepts before.
Gotcha.
Because they're not everything the media, and listen, they are literally the enemy of the cathedral. They are the enemy of the cathedral. They are the ones that have made them look foolish for the last 5 years. So they're going to do whatever they can to make everybody on that side look bad. But it's not all of them. And he does an amazing job painting that picture and explaining throughout the entire book.
The one thing that stuck out at me was he doesn't care what you think. He cares that you think.
Yes.
Right? Like, he cares that there's a process that got you. If you're a white supremacist, tell me why and do a deep dive. Don't just come up with some talking point.
But he treats the person as a person, right? Instead of kind of dehumanizing him. And that's a really big part of what he's trying to do is like these people aren't out there hating actual people, right? They hate peoples maybe, right? But like they don't hate that individual person. And they're trying to deal with a world that is completely chaotic in so many ways. And we don't have a clear idea of what's going on. And so people grasp for solutions.
So the one charming thing I find, well, charming is the wrong word. The intelligent thing I find about him is that he acknowledges that some people have no interest in having a conversation with you or a genuine debate. And that's why he resorts to trolling, right? Just switch the paradigm and flip the conversation to something crazy to kind of put the person off guard. And there's a lot of instances that he brings up where actors or artists or political types do that to not win the argument, but to disrupt the enemy, right? To just kind of flip the person who's attacking him and turn them around. And I mean, the Andy Kaufman little joke where he, does the Tony Hinchcliffe thing, I was laughing my balls off when he brings that up, where he slaps the actress who everyone thinks is a little girl, and everyone's like, "Oh, how could you do that?" And he's like, "Don't boo! She's gonna think you're booing her."
Yeah.
And everyone's like, and now they don't know whether to like feel bad for the girl or be indignant that he slapped her.
Yeah.
So that kind of thing is like, that's not where your mind goes. And Twitter is not. That's not where your mind goes on Twitter. On Twitter, someone says something, you're like, "Fuck that guy! I'm gonna say this." blah 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 blah, and you want to argue with them. And he's proven that that's very effective. To just don't engage in that. The trolling is more effective.
Because he also says that there's tons of people out there now that like they have this like inflated self-worth because they believe that they're fighting for the collective, and that makes them one of the good people. Like, we're all inherently bad. This is also part of the evangelical part. We're all inherently racist and bigoted and transphobic and everything, and the only thing saving us and the world is progressivism. So I am like a superhero fighting for the progressivism that's going to save everyone.
He calls them out, and then he goes, do you understand it's not about the gays? They were talking about gay people and how the left is this and how the progressivism is ruining society and everything with the gays and all that, right? And he goes, if gay people never existed, they'd find some other group to champion in order to dominate society. So it's not about the particular issue that the left brings up. He tells you it's not about the issue. It's about dominating you. It's about controlling you and controlling the language and controlling the narrative. So stop focusing on the issue that they're putting at the front and focus on what they're doing to control you and then undermine it. And that's where the trolling comes in, because when you undermine it and you make them look foolish, the rest of the population goes, oh, they're fucking idiots. So he goes out of his way to explain that there is a difference, though, between the evangelical left and the left.
Yeah.
Right? He does explain
Yeah.
that it comes down to ideology, which is the difference. And then he goes into explaining how, where is it? He goes, there's only like 3 real possible things that you could actually care about, right? And everything else starts to reduce to such a small, ridiculous percentage of the amount that you can, what do they call it? He calls it, what kind of paradox is it? It's the pistachio paradox, right?
With the ice cream, yeah.
Yeah. So it's like, what are your 4 favorite flavors of ice cream, right? And he talks about how it breaks it down, and it breaks it down to the point where, like, once you get to like the 4th option, it's like 0.27% of the actual year. You actually eat one day a year. You eat pistachio ice cream. But your fourth issue, you would never you would never put over your top issue 99% of the time.
Yep.
So the constant virtue signaling is bullshit, because there's no way you can possibly care that much about that many things.
Yeah. He keeps coming back to Buchanan and Murray Rothbard.
I was just gonna go
Right?
there, because
Like,
he does a beautiful
go
job
for it.
he does a phenomenal job of painting the scene with history. He has such a mind for history, and that's one of the things that I've always liked about Michael is he always knows what happened, when, with who, and how, and he has that mind.
Right? Like, we don't need to have 55% of us believing that the cathedral is bad and all those other types of things. We just need a very small minority of us. And he uses the example of the founding of the United States, right? Where that was literally a conspiracy. These men met in secret, all white men, of course, all met in secret. And they had to close the windows. I remember when I was a kid hearing about this, right? Like, they had to make sure that the windows were closed and no one could hear what they were talking about and all this sort of stuff. And it's like, oh wow, they were so badass and cool, right? But like, if anybody talked about that same type of thing happening now, it would be like, you're off. We're gonna hang
Insurrection.
you. Yeah, it's insurrection, right?
It's insurrection.
And so I thought that was that. But that's why he's so white pilled, and which is why I love Michael Malice. Is he's not pessimistic at all, right? He's like,
He's very
hope.
positive. He
Right.
knows there's opportunity, and he even says in the very beginning of the book, he goes, when the idea that the right now, the new right has, is that when I'm standing in front of a room, I don't need a room of 100 people to agree with what I say. You know, I just need like 3 or 4 people to agree with what I say, or even 2 people to agree with what I say, so that we can then start a conversation and then the ideas can grow. It's not about convincing everybody. It's about convincing somebody. Yeah.
But yeah, so to that point, like someone said, like, when you ask people, like, how would you feel about being like canceled in today's culture, and they'd be like, oh, that'd be awful. That's like the worst thing. And cancel culture, everyone thinks is new.
Yeah.
It's not. Someone said, like, try being someone who was anti-war during World War I or World War II.
Oh, yeah, sure.
You
Debs
were
was in
shit
prison.
on.
What,
Like,
Debs was in
shit
prison
on.
for like 10 years or something.
The one thing that I did want to get into is the way he talked about how, with some of the people on the new right, Pinochet is their Che Guevara.
Yeah.
Right? He's their Che Guevara in the sense where he would take Marxists up in the helicopters and throw them out. And that's when. So if you're ever on Facebook or Twitter and you see somebody making helicopter jokes and you don't know what they're talking about, that person is on the new right.
I
and
actually
he is-
learned that from this book. I had
You had no idea?
No, dude.
Oh,
Ever saw
no.
Scarface?
Not to mention like all the
Yeah,
that have
there's-
their pronouns, but it's like I am. Howard.
That's a long time
yeah,
ago.
Yeah, with a little gymnast tumbling next to it.
I've seen it a million times, but I'd never really I just figured they were throwing.
They would
people out of
sometimes hang
helicopters.
them too, but like in the book, he refers to them throwing them in the ocean.
Yes,
I think
he
he would
talks about them
hog
throwing
tie
them in the
them
ocean.
and throw them in the water.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
Out of the helicopter. Yeah. So he just goes into talking about how a lot of what their thought process is comes from that angle. Not necessarily that they literally want to throw Marxists out of helicopters, but that it's attacking the ideology in the same way.
That's the cornerstone of the cathedral is the combination of the government and the state apparatus and media, right? You need a distribution mechanism because something he keeps coming back to is, especially on the progressive side, and I know we're like dunking on like the progressives and the leftists. He even says that they don't have a monopoly on these types of tactics and outcomes, right? It's just, it's a little bit different in terms of the way that, I mean, they're the majority now, so that's who this goes against. But the propaganda piece is they need to control the narrative, because the narrative is all they have. When you fight them on, just destroying the fact that they have no standing to actually, hold up to their views, they can't hang, right? So like they have to control the narrative constantly. If you obliterate the narrative, then you can win. But like that combination of the media with the state and with that progressive movement it's brutal. It's dangerous.
If you look at chapter 4 when he talks about meme magic is real, that comes to light so much. The complete opposites of the new right and the old right. It's just the way he talks about how the what was it, the gamer what was it?
Gamergate. That was a big
how
deal.
Gamergate was really the beginning of how Trump won the presidency.
Well, it also it started the whole fake news thing, right?
Exactly. It what it did was it stripped down as just frauds because they caught them coordinating their stories to promote certain people or to hold back certain people by letters in the mail. So that, and then they caught them through that. And then that's when they realized, because these were a bunch of gamers, oh, wait, this is a game. Yeah. We know how we can analyze the way that our enemy is attacking us the same way we analyze the way Bowser attacks us in
the
Mario.
Goombas. He talks about the Goombas,
right?
yeah.
The Goombas in Mario. We can understand the way just like the Goombas attack us a certain way, we have to do this. Well, when the media attacks us a certain way, we do that, and it works. They caught on to that. They started playing the meme magic. You got the Donald on Reddit. You got what was it on 4chan? Poll, right?
Poll, yeah.
Yeah, 4chan
and
poll.
with the GME thing recently, right, with GameStop, right? You
Same
have literally
thing.
on like what is it? All these Fox Business and stuff like that, like having tendies and like diamond hands,
Yeah.
like explaining all this shit. And he's
To the moon!
It's
absolutely
hilarious.
It's
It's
absolutely
hilarious. They have
Because
no
one can
idea
watch
what's
that
going
and take
on.
these people seriously.
But so no, Malice even alludes to like some of these like old school, like I think in some of the universities in England when they were founded and stuff like that, there were these very progressive groups that figured out that they weren't going to win over the short term. So like there was some phrase that he was like, it basically means we are going to win in the long term. And it's taken them 100 years in some cases, 200 years. But they've set the table and they were like, look, it's the same thing with gun rights, right? That Second Amendment, they're never going to come out and be like, okay, all guns are illegal. They're going to limit the mags. They're going to limit the buttstocks. They're going to limit the sights. And then they start limiting the caliber, how long the thing is, until you get to the point where you can't even get a concealed carry permit because technically it's all right, allowed.
Wait,
we'll
but
have
they make
news
you
on
go
that
through a
soon.
freaking maze.
But anyway, the analogy he makes, midwits obviously people of middle intelligence who then like feel self-righteous because they know more than someone beneath them, therefore they think they're the most intelligent.
Yep.
And he brings up the analogy about universities, right? The part of the cathedral, as he calls it, that they polled some university and they polled all the faculty and they asked them, what level of intelligence, how much smarter do you think you are than everyone else?
It was. Do you think you're an above average teacher?
Yeah.
Right, that's what
Right.
it was.
And
90% said they were.
Said yes.
Yeah.
So
I
how is
think-
it possible that 90% of this people think they're smarter
Okay,
than
sure.
everybody else?
Likewise, I think if you ask almost any profession, right? If you say, "Hey, are you above average at your job?" I think you're gonna have almost the exact same effect. I don't think that it's unique to university professors.
Right.
Yeah.
I don't think he was saying that it's only unique to them, but it's just the concept that people have this like
Yes.
heuristic effect about themselves. Where
Right,
they
but I think
bias.
everybody does that. I think the vast majority of people overestimate their intelligence and overestimate their competency. I don't think that's a new thing.
I don't know. So like, not to put you on blast, but like Dan does the opposite. Like Dan always says like, oh well, you get on the show and like you say some smart stuff. I'll just be here and
Yeah, but
watch.
if you ask him about how
then,
good he is
but
at his
then
job,
Dan
he's
will
definitely
drop
above
in with
average.
some dynamite stuff, right? So like that's the opposite. It's like underperform,
No,
over
sure,
deliver,
but that's
right?
also not his profession.
That's just leadership 101, bro.
Well, it is, but
Yeah.
but
But I think if you ask Dan, is he above average at his profession? He's definitely going to say yes.
well, to your point though, I think you're right in that there's a certain universality of people have very little concept of how big the range is.
Sure.
Right? Like, so I don't even think, like, they might think they're better than, like, the other 5 people at their school or whatever.
See you, thank you.
Good night. But, yeah, they might think that they're better than, like, 5 of the 10 teachers that are in their grade school or whatever, right? Which gives them impetus to actually say that. But also, from the same respect, I can see where he's coming from, because just think about it this way. The triumvirate is university, media, and government. Those are the 3 things, right? Sure. And he makes the argument, or I think someone else makes the argument later on, it might have been Taylor, that talks about, all right, the other 2 come from university. It comes from education. Okay. And so what we've done is we've essentially commoditized education to the point where pretty much everyone that can sign their name and their life away as an indentured servant can at least get an attempt at an undergraduate degree. And then all these people graduate from college with an undergraduate degree, and they think that, all right, well, I have a college degree, I must be freaking brilliant, right? No, like the vast majority of them are still, and so that's why I'll come back to, like, one of my first points is he doesn't, like, he's never gonna, like, Mike, I would never think would look at your resume. Again, I don't want to put words in his mouth, right? But if I was putting myself in his place, wouldn't necessarily like look at your resume and be like, oh, you have a fantastic resume, you must be a smart person, right? I get the impression he'd rather speak to you and find out what your thought process is.
And lastly, if you're new to us, Blue Star Union, we're a civil rights group based in New Jersey. If you like what you heard, please go to Blue Star Union and donate. All of our donations are tax deductible. And we have a lot of activism coming out in 2021. This was our maiden voyage in 2020. We were founded like 7 months ago. So we have a lot of things coming down the pike. They were alluding to stuff with courts and police and lawsuits. We're going to have some news on that front, hopefully very soon. And thank you for Matt and Why Libertarian and your audience for also participating and being a part of it.